Welcome to Bounce, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of product teams, the challenges they face, and the incredible stories of resilience that emerge. I'm Molly Cox, your co-host, a product designer with a knack for navigating through the storms of creativity.
And I'm your co-host, Claire Flowers, a product manager who's seen it all, the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
Each week, we'll bring you tales of product traumas, those moments that test our limits, they push our boundaries, and sometimes bring us to our knees.
We're talking about career flops and follies and those pivotal moments when everything seems to fall apart.
But as we know, the harder you fall, the higher you bounce. We'll explore with our guests their toughest challenges,
The actions they took to overcome them,
and how these experiences have shaped their careers and continue to impact them today.
So join us in this journey of resilience, growth, and bouncing back stronger than ever.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Molly Cox, co-host of Bounce. I'm joined here with Claire Flowers, also co-host. And today we have Trevor Nielsen on the show with us. Super excited for this one. Trevor is a digital product designer from Utah. His professional career as a designer really began back in 2013, and he started off as a freelance graphic designer, then parlayed and made his way over to product design. Was really in-house for a lot of years, worked with a variety of different teams. And that phase kind of abruptly ended for him in 2023, where he was working for a crypto startup that went through some layoffs. But now he's come full circle. He's back in freelance, and I'm really excited to dig into this conversation with him. One more thing, also been working on a startup, helping found Clio, which is a tool that really helps content creators unlock their potential on LinkedIn, which Trevor is also a very large design influencer on LinkedIn. So welcome, Trevor. It's very exciting to have you here today.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here with both of you.
Trevor, one thing that we get questions a lot, me as a product manager, Molly as a designer, is it's constant, like, how do you get into product? We hear a lot from how do you get into product in general, or how do you get into product design? We hear a lot from people who are new to design, maybe have gone through a boot camp or trying to really break into the industry. So I'm really interested to hear how you started, or how you really broke in. I think our listeners would like to hear about that.
Yes, I'd love to explain that, and I will preface it with I think I got lucky. So hopefully it's helpful. I think there are some lessons from how I did it that others could potentially replicate, but I do admit that I was a bit lucky getting into it. So the company that I was working for as a graphic designer, I was on a marketing team, and I was like the dedicated graphic designer on that marketing team, doing website design, some illustration, advertising design, stuff like that. Anyway, that marketing team was part of a bigger organization, and they decided to let go the marketing team. So I had the option to either go get a new job, or I could switch over to a sister company from the parent organization. And they had a spot as a UX designer on a sister company. And so I thought, this was back in 2017. So I was already thinking, I would love to get into UX design somehow. Like, I think that it's becoming more popular. But I loved what I did. I was actually quite hesitant to make the change, because I felt like I was getting pretty good at what I was doing, and I felt like that would maybe spread me too thin in different skill sets. Anyway, it was a great choice. I ended up doing it, and then I realized years later that it was a really great choice to get product knowledge and get that little shortcut into a product team. So anyway, that's why I say I got kind of lucky, because I didn't have to go out and apply for a product design job. It was sort of handed to me in a way, which is great, which I'm grateful for. But I did have the skills where they trusted me, and my manager took me with him, and he helped train me in, he had product experience. And so we both switched and went over to that team.
It's just so interesting. I feel so often, if you've gotten into product design pre-2020, there's just, you just tripped into it. I've heard so many people say, like, oh, I just landed here and I don't even know how that happened. So
Yeah, your story is not an uncommon one. I think that's more times than not, folks either say I got lucky or I stumbled into it. But I think there is a commonality between either stumbling into it or getting lucky. And that is your willingness to do something that is a little bit outside of your comfort zone and learn, or take a role that is maybe not like super comfortable for you. Which I think that seems to be the trend with folks who either end up in product management like myself or design.
Yes, 100%. I feel like I easily could have said, no, this isn't for me. Like it was, and then just been stuck to my comfort zone and tried to specialize in a way. And I think we've learned recently, a lot of us are realizing that generalists are doing pretty well these days. Like it's, as teams are slimming down their headcount, it helps to have, you don't have to necessarily be the best at everything or even at a few things. As long as you are decent at a few things, you can provide a lot of value to a product team, especially for startups. Um, and so, yeah, I agree with that. I think that curiosity, willingness to try new things is, whether it's 2017 or 2024, I feel like that skill is going to take, that it's going to have a ripple effect that helps people try new things. And we probably should still have that now. Like I know there's new tools coming out right now. In fact, I have one in my browser opened up that I want to try called Motif. It's like an AI design product tool, and someone shared it recently, and I was like, I want to try this out. So I don't want to be afraid, or I don't want to ever lose that curiosity to try things, be willing to do scary things. I think everyone's so comfortable in Figma and doing their thing, but we have to be willing to try some new stuff. It makes a big difference.
I couldn't agree more. And, you look at so many of the conversations on LinkedIn right now, and the reality is Figma is just a tool, right? We put so much stock into it, but it's not product design. There's so many different things to use, and there's so many new tools coming out on the horizon right now with AI. And again, that primary tenet of design being curiosity, we have to be open to that stuff. So couldn't agree more. You're kind of talking a little bit about startups, Trevor, and I know for you personally, you've worked at both startups and larger corporations. A lot of questions that I get, especially from new people entering the field, is really figuring out which one is best for them. It's kind of a hot topic. So I'm curious from your perspective, if you can elaborate on some of those key differences that you've noticed in terms of the team dynamics in both of those two types of situations.
Yeah, first of all, I think if when it comes to newer designers, I think it's almost a separate subject, because if you're a newer designer and you are trying to decide, I feel like most newer designers would be extremely lucky to have that option to choose because it's so hard to get a job in the first place, that if you are in a position where you have the option, because that must mean you have multiple job offers, then that's a conversation that's fun to have and dive into the nuances of which one you want to go into. Um, but first, I guess, first of all, for new designers, I would advise maybe don't be too picky before you even have options, because just having a job where you get paid to be a designer is going to be such a huge benefit to your career and your life. Because we go to school, like people go to school and they pay to learn. If you get a job, you're getting paid to learn. So it's just so beneficial to not be too picky. I've seen some people come out of like a popular university or something, and they feel maybe a little bit more like they have a leg up and they're gonna be picky with the job they get, and maybe they have that option, and that's great. But I think for most junior designers, they tend to it's a struggle to get that first job. So I would say in those cases, either one is going to be really great. To have a job and get paid to be a designer, it's so fortunate.
Take what you can get right now, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of all of our mantras right now. So,
Yes, yes. But I guess if you do have the option, I think if a junior has that option, there is some benefit to joining a more established company, because then you get to work with peers. Whereas if you're joining a startup, you're probably going to be a solo designer. And as a junior, that can be tough because you don't have other senior designer leadership to lean on, unless unless you're lucky to have like a good head of design. And if it's just you and the head of design, I would say go for it. Do the startup thing, because as a startup, you're going to get a lot more hands-on craft experience. Whereas in a larger org, you'll get more procedural experience, like going to meetings, talking certain talking to opinions to death of like nitpicking, is this feature worth it? Like, because the larger companies have a bigger budget to really like go deep and um, explore, do a lot more research. I feel like startups I've worked with rarely do much research. So if research is your thing, you may want to aim for a larger organization that has the budget to justify that. So yeah, I feel like those are some of the nuances to consider, depending on how hands-on in the craft you want to get. A startup might be a good option as long as you have, if you're a junior, as long as you have that mentorship alongside that to help you. I think that would be beneficial. Yeah, hopefully
One,
that answers that.
yeah, no, a lot of that rings home for me, not as a designer, but I have experience working for startups, and one of the things that the first startup that I worked for, there was a guy on the team who is more on the like operations side, and it was a small team. I think there was like 6 of us, and we all had our roles. That, there was marketing, there was engineers there. I don't even think we had hired a designer yet. We were kind of using freelancers. And the guy he was sitting next to me one day, and he was more of a consultant role, and he came from huge corporate companies where he consulted on process and scaling teams. And so he was a consultant for this startup. And he said to me one day, he's like, the thing about startups is there's nowhere to hide. And
Yeah,
it kind of rocked my brain a little bit, because it was so true. Like it is there. People should know that working for a startup, it's pressure. I mean, there's pressure to perform, and in large organizations, you can like share the responsibility across a design team, or have someone to kind of like check your work. In a startup, there's nowhere to hide. And so that pressure, I think people need to be cognizant of that pressure and be ready going into it, because at the end of the day, if you don't get your work done, it's very apparent when it's not done.
so true, so true. Yes, I actually I have a few clients at the moment, and one of them is a large organization, and then most of the startups I've worked with as a freelancer are startups. And it's so I have been telling people this lately, that it's so nice having at least one that's like a larger organization, because it just um, it feels a little bit less stressful, because you have like this big team support in a way. And I feel like at a startup, you feel the pressure, because it's almost like everyone's waiting on you. Like things don't
Mm-hmm.
really move forward until you, as in the design or product, you get things moving forward. Like they're all waiting on a prototype. The development team can't start building until there's designs. So at the larger orgs, if they've existed for a few years, or if they just have a lot of funding and they have a lot of different departments, you're just a cog in this big machine. And so you can sort of like I think the hiding analogy you mentioned is perfect, because you can sort of blend in a little bit. And if you do have a lackluster day, or even a week where you're just not feeling it, and you're not, or if you take time off, it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't hurt the company. But at a startup, that can be painful, where if there's a big gap of time where design's not making progress, it's definitely felt by everyone. So yeah, totally resonate with that for sure.
Well, and not only can you not hide sometimes, um, you may walk into a startup and there's not even a product manager. I've been in a startup where there was 4 of us, right? There was a developer, a founder, myself, a back-end and a front-end engineer. And there's no product. Everybody's wearing different hats. And I think that's the difficult thing, is not only can you not hide behind things, but you're expected to pick up numerous different roles. And I think for somebody very fresh, that's a very difficult thing to do sometimes.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, Molly, because I I I've always been a little bit. I felt like I was a little bit out of the loop in some of the designer PM drama that you see online. It's great that you guys are doing a podcast together, because you must get along.
Claire and I have, well,
We
don't be
battle
fooled.
we battle it out.
Just kidding. No, we
But
do.
I'm sure you're fully aware of the disagreements between product design and the battles that go on there. So for a long time, I felt like I didn't understand that drama. I was like, why? And what I realized is I had mostly worked with startups where I didn't have a lot of experience working side by side with the PM. So for the past since doing freelance work, I now, like, that larger org I work with, I've worked with like 6 different PMs, and I love it. And so it kind of makes me realize, like, what are these
See,
designers
Molly?
thinking?
I know
PMs
some
can
people
be
do.
useful.
It is
See?
true. It is true, Claire. Thanks, Trevor. Just kidding.
I'm not trying to pick sides here. I'll let you two battle that out on your own. But
we'll take this out later.
Yeah. Pull out the gloves. But it's just funny because I'm like, a PM is meant to make things easier for everyone, right? They're organizing things. So yeah, to your point, Molly, the companies that I've worked for that are usually startups that don't have a PM, a lot of that falls on top of the designer, or somebody's got to pick up the pieces of documentation, connecting different teams together. And I'm sure there have been some legitimate reasons for the beef between design and product, but for me, I've been fortunate, I guess, to work with great PMs, and it's made life so much easier. So that is definitely something to consider if if you're looking at a startup. Those are good questions to ask. Like, who's going to take care of, the communication between dev, design, and obviously design. Even if you have a PM, designers should be talking to the development, but it's different. As if you've worked in it, it's different. There's the PMs are usually very, very in tune with what the development team's got going on, and that makes a huge difference for the designers.
For sure. And I think where you're heading with this too is there's so many different types of startups, right? There's early stage, there's seed round, there's series A, then there's one in a series C, and those all mean completely different things. And there's going to be a completely different volume of employees at each one of those stages. So for me, having just been in this field for so long, I know where I gravitate. I've been in large corporations. That's not really for me. I am a dig in and get it done person. So startups is where I really love, but I also really love those later stage startups where we've got some foundational processes. We've got PMs. Claire, I do love you so much.
I know you do.
We've got those PMs with us. We've got a more robust engineering team. So there's different stages that you have to look at as well when you're looking at startups. But I think we would be remiss to not talk about the risk that comes with it. I myself, if you look at my resume, someone could obviously say I'm a job hopper, but at the same time, you could look like that when you've worked at so many different startups. So, Trevor, what kind of risk have you encountered or think is present within that startup world?
Yes, there are. You're such a good topic. There are risks. And as far as the job hopper topic, I think it's so funny because now, as I'm a freelancer, like, if I were to list every company I've worked with in the past year, contractors it's expected that you might work with a team for 3 to 6 months, maybe 12 months. Like, you are a job hopper by nature. But for some reason, when it's full-time jobs we're talking about, there's like this shame factor to job hopping. It's like, what's the difference? Like, if you're a full-timer or a contractor. Anyway, I have some job hopping in my history as well, so
I'm in complete agreement with you on that. Like, 1 year at an organization internal can be the exact same as 1 year as a contract. So I don't know why I don't think the gold watches at 40 years really exist anymore. So especially in the tech industry.
Exactly. And so back to your question about risk, I think that it depends on your risk tolerance. Obviously, I feel like I have a pretty high risk tolerance, but not as high as some. Like, I've never taken the full-time leap to just go do my own startup. I've always had it as like either a side hustle while I still had my salary day job, or I join an early startup where it is high risk because they haven't found product market fit at all, but I get equity because I'm joining. And so that equity has the potential to become worth, in 4 to 5 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars as a cash payout, or best case scenario, millions of dollars. So for me, that little glimmer of hope makes the risk worth it to me if you're joining a startup. Whereas if you join a larger organization, they've already reached product market fit. You're taking on much less risk joining them, so you don't get to benefit from the upside of, there's a chance this might fail, so they can just pay you with cash. And so it's great because then you get this stable cash, but then you don't have this future glimmer of hope of like this big future life-changing payout. And so I've always been a fan of trying to take those opportunities where there's something extra, where it's like, I'm not for sure stuck in the rat race until I'm 65, because there's something there that is like, I take a little bit of extra risk and then I get this potential life-changing reward. So, but when assessing that, you have to really understand what to look for. And for me, I think it comes down to there's so many stars that have to align to take an opportunity. And at my last startup, it was a crypto startup, and the stars all aligned. It was such an exciting opportunity, and so it was so sad that it ended the way it did. But crypto's so volatile. I mean, I knew that going into it, but the stars aligned, meaning the team was great. The founding team had a lot of experience. The product was a very hot product. It was in a hot industry, crypto at that time in 2021 or 2022 when I joined. It was just like such a hot thing. A lot of people are probably feeling that right now with AI. It's like an AI startup. I'm gonna become a millionaire if I join this.
Yeah, I'm like, does crypto even exist anymore? Like, what happened to NFTs? Like, I don't even know.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone talk about NFTs for a while, and I even own a couple, and I haven't even logged into my account.
I don't even know where they are. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go find those. They might be worth millions. Maybe I'm a millionaire. I don't even know it. Probably not. So yeah, I think the risk, you just have to look at it from all the different angles: the team, the industry, the timing. There's just so many things that have to go right. Your role, like how if you have to be excited about your role joining it. When I joined that crypto startup, it was me and one other designer. He started like a month and a half before me, and I already knew him, and he was an incredible designer. So I was like, yes, me and him building this crypto app. Like, it was a dream position for me at that time. So yeah, just you have to look at all these things and say, there's a chance this might fail, and am I okay with that? So, and at the end of the day, you gain experience from it. Like, I have zero regrets. Even though I worked there a year and a half, got laid off, it was totally worth it. Wouldn't change a thing. So
yeah,
the risks are not always that scary.
They're not, but I mean, they're present. Like you said,
Yeah.
Even though there was another designer there, I've been in a 4-person startup where it didn't work out. And, the statistic right now is that, 90% of all startups will fail. And first-time founders, only 18% of first-time founders are typically successful. Right.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot more that goes into the fact too, when you're looking at like, who are the founders? Do I get along with the founders? Can I work? So there's a lot of stake you got to put into that, And so with that risk, Claire and I are going to be doing an episode upcoming talking about layoffs and firings and how we've been impacted by that. Because again, equity can be a shiny, bright object, and it can be a wonderful thing. It can work out, but you have to remember it. There's about maybe a 10% chance that it will. And of those 10% that actually make it, what of those will IPO, right?
Yes. Yes. So true. And one thing I would advise too is to only consider equity if you have a pretty good situation with cash, whether it's your own personal savings or whether it's like some other thing you can fall back on. Like, I know I have a friend that works in the medical industry, and but then he switched into software. So he got laid off from his software job, and he immediately could pick up shifts at the hospital. So he like has this always there job security where he's like, I can always fall back because they always are looking for people to pick up shifts at the hospital. So I was like, that's pretty awesome. Like, he has this almost like a guaranteed safety net that's always going to be there. So that can give you more liberty to take risks if you have some cash security. So if it means if you're joining a startup, I have never been a fan of taking like, if it's a full-time role, like don't let them swindle you into taking a tiny salary, unless you are like a founding member. Like if you're an employee and you're getting a tiny portion of equity, you should still be fighting for a fair cash offer. Like the equity, it's just like this risk, ownership, equity versus cash. Like, you have to balance it out and not let someone take advantage of you. So, and I think to learn this, it's there's not like a recipe that's like the perfect way to solve every situation. It takes a bit of intuition and maybe making some mistakes. But I think you should lean on trying to get compensation for what you're doing as much as possible. But I think more people should be open to some risk, because there are opportunities that could exist that people might be closed off to just because they have zero risk tolerance, and they're like, I just want my salary paycheck, want to work my 9 to 5 and go home. And if that's you, that's great. But I just can't live that way. I'm like, I need that little glimmer, like I need that a glimmer of hope that something big could come of the effort I'm doing that's beyond just like my paycheck.
See, and I'm just like you, and I need the pressure. Claire, I would
Yeah.
assume you're very, very similar to that.
I am.
Yeah. Claire and I are very like in many, many ways.
That's good.
Trevor, I want to ask, so we're talking about risk. And I just said I've been in startups that haven't worked out. I myself have been laid off and been in, a risky situation that didn't pay off for myself. I know that just happened to you in 2023. Not too long ago, you put out this amazing post that kind of showed all the statistics that you've gone through in the last year. And in the intro, I even said that you started out in freelance. Well, here you find yourself, you've come full circle, and here you find yourself in freelance again. So really being, Bounce is really a podcast about resilience and kind of taking that situation that we didn't expect and making something of that. Talk about what your last year has looked like in resilience for you, and just where that path has led you so far.
Yeah, no, that's a fun topic. I love the topic and the theme of your podcast. I love a podcast that has a theme. A lot of them are just straight up design.
You're just like
straight up product.
Yeah.
But I think the theme is great, because then you can it's like a story, and all of your episodes are like chapters in the story. So I think that's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'm happy to be part of one of the chapters. And so the past year has been, for me, it's been pretty eye-opening, because I always thought someday I would be self-employed. Like, that was my end goal. I just never wanted to be a 9 to 5 employee for the rest of my career, but I was just being very patient and always doing things as a side hustle. And so my plan was eventually to get there. And I always told people I hate freelance work, because what I realized is that every time I did freelance work, it was in addition to a full-time job. So I had created this negative feeling in my head towards freelance work, because it was always stressful. It was always, I'm tired and I have to do freelance work.
You always had
and
to do that one more thing at the end of the day,
I always had
right?
to try to squeeze it in, and always was a thing that just caused me stress. I was like, I hate freelance work. So I never planned on becoming a full-time freelancer again. But the fun thing about it now is that it's opened up my eyes to just being more open to revenue opportunities. Like, when I got laid off, I was like, wow, you don't realize how you're putting your eggs all in one basket until you only have one income and you lose it instantly. And you have like 1 month of severance, and you're like, I got to figure things out very quickly. Then you start to realize how nice it would have been to have built up at least 2 streams of revenue, so you're not so dependent on just this one day job, and then you're in trouble and you're stressed out. And then even when you do get a job, you're still stressed out, because you're like, I could lose this. So it's like, people think that self-employment is this stressful thing, but in a way, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like the 9 to 5 it stresses me out a little bit now, thinking about going back to a 9 to 5, because I'm like, there's always that chance I'll get laid off. And if that's my only income, then I'm in trouble. So the past year has been this eye-opening experience of realizing, even if it's freelance work, it still feels safer, because I've had a client or two pause with me. Like, I usually do like a monthly payment. I don't call it a subscription. I don't really like that phrase in the design world.
Maybe a retainer. I don't know, something
retainer.
like that. Yeah, okay.
I definitely do use the word retainer more often. And I've had clients pause with me, but then it's always so nice to know I didn't go straight to zero income. I maybe went to 50% income, or like 65%. Like, I lost a portion of my income, but I'm not in trouble, because now I just got to go replace that one, rather than replacing 100% of my income. And the odds of everyone dropping me at the same time is possible, but I would say that's less likely to happen than a layoff from a full-time job. So it feels like this eye-opener that, like, wow, self-employment is not this super risky, scary thing that I always thought it was. And freelance work isn't this scary thing if it's your main thing. Like, it doesn't have to be this stressful thing, it can be very enjoyable, and it feels very similar to full-time work because I'm part of these teams. I'm like a part-timer, but just on more than one team. So, but it's very similar. So it's been awesome. I have no plans of going back to a full-time job unless something just really, really awesome jumped out, but I'm not looking for it, and I can't imagine it just popping out of nowhere. There's in this market. So, the last year has been awesome. I'm pretty happy with how things are going at the moment.
One question, and you don't have to answer this. This might be too personal. Is the earning potential in freelance greater than a full-time gig?
I will be more happy to answer that question after tax season.
Okay.
Touche. Are we talking net or gross, Claire?
Exactly.
I'm talking net.
So I think it is. I'm going to say I think, because I have a really good accountant that I'm working with, and I'm excited to see what we can do, but it just depends on how you structure things. It depends on the type of entity you have, whether it's like an LLC, and whether you have a partner or not. Like there's these little nuances that it just pays to have a good accountant. So I actually have a meeting with him in a couple of weeks where we're going to just like look into how things are going and try to forecast the last couple months of the year and see if I need to make any big changes or any big business purchases towards the end of the year, cause I just don't know what, it's so hard to know what it's going to look like. And so I think after the first year, I'm going to feel like I understand, okay, I can see how the gross versus the net's going to be. I can see what things I need to spend money on, what things that are like beneficial to the business that actually help. Because that's the thing. I have another designer friend that's self-employed, and he says that like he's in a way better spot, and he ends up spending less on taxes because of how much of his life becomes a business write-off. So it just, everyone's different. Totally depends on how things go. But as far as gross, I will say it can definitely be much bigger depending on how you price it and how many clients you work with. So it's a lot of work, though. I will say it's a lot of work no matter how you slice it up.
Yeah. But at least you're betting on yourself.
Exactly. And that kind of goes in tandem with what I was just going to say, Claire, like betting on yourself. The philosophy for so many years has essentially been betting on your company, right? There's a safety net there. There's something, we feel safe, we feel harbored. Nothing's going to happen to us. We can work that 40 years and get that gold watch that we just referred to not too long ago. Not a Rolex, obviously, but the tides have changed. And I do think there is something about the philosophy now switching to feeling safer with doing your own thing. It's almost safer now to start your own startup because you can bet on yourself. You can bet on your own skills or from that freelance work, because ultimately, even when you get laid off, it's a huge shock because you have this false sense of safety. No matter, every time I work at an organization, whether they're a startup or not, I have that false sense of safety. So Trevor, kind of going back to that moment in 2023, I mean, were you kind of anticipating that? Talk about a little bit about how you felt in that moment. Cause I know for me, just the amount of negative self-talk I did to myself, even though it had nothing to do with me, you found your way out on the other side, but did you anticipate then where you would be right now?
I did not. I had been preparing for that moment subconsciously for a while, though, because when I started at that company, it actually was the same time that I started writing online, because I didn't think I was going to get necessarily laid off, but I thought, I'm one day going to want other options. And I feel like the more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities are going to pop up. So coincidentally, like right when I started that job is when I started writing online. And then little did I know that 18 months later, that effort of writing online would actually be a huge benefit to what happened. So I didn't anticipate it then. It's, I guess it's two questions. Did I anticipate getting laid off? I didn't. And it was, right towards the few weeks before it happened, I had a hunch. So I actually did start prepping my portfolio. There's just a couple of things that happened internally at the company that I was like, I'm not so sure about this. So I started prepping my portfolio at the beginning of that month, and then sure enough, at the end of the month, it happened, and I was really grateful to have that little mini head start. Um, but and then the second part, I didn't anticipate becoming a full-time freelancer. Trying to co-found the Clio, that startup I'm working on. I didn't anticipate any of that, but I feel like the writing and putting myself out there on LinkedIn like led to a lot of that, because those were opportunities that came as a result of me almost withdrawing from that personal branding bank account. I had been putting into it, just writing for free, not asking for anything. I was just doing it for fun, thinking someday I might want to benefit from this. And I think there's clearly a benefit to doing it. It just is a lot of work. But I started having fun with it, writing posts, sharing stuff, and not really anticipating what would come of it. But then it was pretty cool to have that as something to then draw upon when the time came. But I'm not sure if that totally answers your question. I feel like I went in like 4 different directions with that one.
No, it does. It's about, I think the bottom line is for anyone who's listening right now who's gone through the situation, I think most of us are, for the most part, blindsided because there are signs, there will be signs, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
just like those the trend right now, if I win the lottery, there will be signs. But if a company's gonna go down, there will be signs. But I think there's also that certain sense of safety net that we tell ourselves that we have. Mm-hmm. So I think all of us feel, no matter the situation we're in, a little blindsided to some extent. And we take it personally because we put so much of our personal selves into the business that we're working for. And then you go through the job market right now. And I don't care if you've been in it 20 years versus 1, we are all having a difficult time in the job market right now. It's very humbling. I've worked with so many seniors. I'm working with an individual right now doing presentations. And they're like, I'm not used to this. Like, this is just not what the market's been like. And it's tough. And so a lot of people, the reason we kind of wanted to dig into this, a lot of the people are asking the question, should I go into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it is so interesting, the shift, because in a way the market's rough right now, but in a weird way that's almost benefiting freelancers. And the reason I think that's benefiting is because companies are maybe afraid to fill up their overhead with all these full-timers and then have to go do a public announcement of layoffs later. So that people are like these employers, these teams are scared of having big teams, big product teams like they did in the past. So it's so much easier to just hire a contractor for a few months with no long-term commitment. It's so much easier to pause with a contractor than it is to lay off a full-time employee. Like it's almost normal. Like that's why, like the back to the beginning, like the whole job hopping thing. It's like, well, with contractors, it's not weird to work with multiple companies in a single year. But for some reason, when it's a full-time thing and if somebody sees you had 3 jobs in a year, they're like, what happened? It's like, you're a problem. But it's like, why is that different than a contractor? Why does it have to be so different? So yeah, I feel like it's in a way benefiting the freelance community because there's all these opportunities for people to do part-time work that for companies that are not willing, they don't have the budget, or they're just afraid to spend the big money on a designer or a product individual. So yeah, I think it's a good opportunity right now. And I'm not that's not to say there's just like this endless amount of leads, but I mean, maybe there are. I don't know. I admit I don't get like tons and tons of leads for design work every week. I get a few here and there, and sometimes exciting things happen, but I definitely get more of those than I ever did full-time job outreach. Like, I just think it's more common that it's easier. It's a lower budget thing. Pick up a freelancer for a few $1,000 a month versus hiring a full-timer for $150,000, $200,000 a year. It's a littler thing on the spreadsheet. It's a littler number. It's very easy for them to pull the trigger and just sign you up within a few days instead of this 8 interview process where everyone has to vet you out. It's just easy. Like they talk to you. They can try you out for a month. If they don't like it, you can part ways. So yeah, I think the freelance opportunity it's big right now.
Claire, what does that look like? Do you have a touch point on that in product management right now as well? I know I see so many product managers even going fractional contracting. I feel like this isn't just a design thing. This is a product org thing, engineering, even in a whole. This is a tech landscape. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. I see a lot of fractional PM work out there, and it's very similar. I think there's a company called like Fractional or something, and it shows you it shows you like a calculator on how you like figure out what your hourly rate can be. And I think that, well, I'm not really sure if a lot of PMs are doing that. I think that it's definite. There's definitely a market for it for sure. Especially to your point, a lot of organizations, startups, maybe not startups, have heard of this thing called product management or product design. They don't really know what it is. And so it is just like a really good way to kind of test it out. So instead of like hiring someone, you're like, we don't really know what we've heard that you need one of these people, but like we don't really know what they do. And it gives you kind of like a way to get paid to interview with the company and kind of show what you can do. And that can sometimes turn into a full-time job, or you can just continue to consult with them. But it's definitely a big thing in product manager world right now.
Yeah, I've seen a couple. I would say from my perspective, and I wouldn't definitely in like the design community more heavily, but I've worked specifically with one contract PM, and I've seen a couple, but it's been a little bit less common, but I've definitely seen it from where I'm from my perspective.
One of the things I've heard is from product managers who are fractional PMs or working as contractors is the context switching can be very challenging. Maybe they have a full-time job and they have a customer on the side, and you're having to like switch in these different like strategic mindsets, a lot of times very far from each other. Do you experience that with context switching across your different clients?
Yes.
Yes.
And it is hard. I would say that is definitely one of the cons of what I do. Is it when you work with just one team, you just can go so deep. Like you just feel like you can just learn that product inside and out. When you work with multiple teams, it feels a little bit more surface level. I mean, you still learn the ins and outs of what the users want, what's going on. You do iterations. Um, it's just not to the depth of like, this is my one thing, this is my dedicated focus. So one thing that I'm actually trying to do right now is what I've learned, and everyone's gonna have different opinions, but I find that like working with 4 to 5 clients at once is tough. Like I know I see some agencies out there, and if it's an agency, it's different. They probably have hired help. I'm a solo designer. 4 to 5 is tough. Like 4 to
Yeah.
5 clients is just, that's just too many different teams to be
Well, because
involved
you're
with.
managing your business too. It's not just the
Yes.
design work. Yeah.
Yes. So that has been tough, but I'm trying to currently slim it down to 2, maybe 3, but just like higher ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like my current thing, and I'm getting closer to that. So yeah, because at first I was doing like a smaller monthly fee, trying to just get as many as I can, because I was like in that mode of I just want to pick up clients, and so if it's this lower ticket, then they're more likely to sign with me, and then I can have more diversified income. Like imagine like 5 clients are not going to drop you, but then you working with 5 clients, you're like, this isn't ideal.
Overextended.
I'm very grateful to have clients. I know people are struggling to find clients, and I know, so I don't want to like sound ungrateful for that, but once you get there, you will get there. If you're looking for that and you're working hard at finding clients, you will get there, and then you'll realize like you'll find your own limits, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I'm learning mine, and trying to find the ideal balance. And I feel like I'm getting a little closer, but still not quite there.
For sure. I think that when you're probably early in your freelancing journey, you hear this thing about like context switching and the cost of context switching and how you can meet diminishing returns. It's hard to really know that until you hit a max, and then you're like, okay, I'm spread too thin. The quality of my work diminishes at this number of clients. And so I think that becomes a forcing function for you and gives you more confidence to go back and say like, nope, I'm going to shrink this down, but up my price. And then your quality goes up, and then your stress level probably goes down.
Yeah, I think you described it perfectly. Like that, I feel like that's exactly what I sense is happening. And I've heard that from other people too. That when they increase their prices, they typically work less and have less stress, which is kind of crazy to think about. Um, and and then also on the flip side, I feel like I'm kind of realizing that there is like a and everyone might be different, but for me, I feel like when I only have one singular focus and it's one job, I feel like it's a little easy to get maybe not bored, but I and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I feel like a lot of teams don't need a full-time designer. Like sometimes the development team can't even go fast enough to build all the designs of one full-time designer. So that's just one thing that I've been realizing with these clients is like a couple of them had said like, yeah, we were looking for a full-time designer. We'll start you out part-time, but we'd love for it to become a full-time thing. And I'm like, okay, we'll see. Like, and I'm not like hoping for that, but I'm just like, let's great. Let's just see how it goes. And then that topic never comes up again. They realize like with me doing part-time design work, that's sufficient for what their team can build. And so I'm like, I feel like there's like this happy medium where you find that a full-time job, like you can almost be unneeded. Like you don't feel like you're doing as much as you could. And it's easy to maybe feel like you're being lazy or something. So I feel like there is this balance of like, it's almost, for me personally, it's almost like better to have more than one team to work with. But then you find that there's a limit where it's too many. So there's like this happy threshold somewhere in the middle.
I totally agree. And I think that I honestly think too much time on a project I don't want you to wince when I say this, can be a bad thing because because there is such a thing as analysis paralysis, one,
For
and
sure.
and two, beating a dead horse on a thing.
Mhm.
And I've found that there's a sweet spot in where I'm coming up with, whatever the first iteration, the MVP, defining the MVP. If I have too long to think about that, I'm ruminating and ruminating, and then I start questioning myself. And I found that the work when I'm crunched ends up being better intuition wise. That if you come to something with an opinion and intuition, and then a lot of times, not all the time, if you spend too long on that, you start questioning it, and then it has just like a negative effect to where you're questioning everything. But if you really would have just like called the shot and learned and and adjusted, then that actually would have been good. So I would think that freelance is a good opportunity to like really just kind of go start become a master of like following your intuition and not ruminating or beating a dead horse subject on whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true with startups because I feel like the Facebooks, the DoorDash, the larger organization like tech companies, they are at a point where they just dominated their market so thoroughly that at that point they're just making micro adjustments. So those design teams and product teams are like they are beating the dead horse, but it's not really dead. It's just they're 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 just looking for any little
It was
leverage.
knocked out a long time ago, but it's not
Yeah.
quite dead yet. Right.
Yeah, the thing was good. Why did we do this expensive redoing of this thing that was good that ultimately pissed customers off? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Slack, but a lot of the most recent product updates, I'm like, you messed it up.
Yeah, what are you
Like,
doing
that was
for me?
what are you doing? That was a miss. You had a good thing, now it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
But yeah.
isn't that interesting? Even Figma, like a lot of people complaining about the UI changes, which is funny that just this week they like reverted back to the old UI.
Yeah.
But it's just funny, like so these teams just get so big and they just maxed out their potential. But then they're the way that they operate. There's like this VP of whatever department that comes in and is like, I'm gonna make an impact here. I'm gonna show them what's up. We're gonna change things up, and then it's just almost like this political game at that point, and it's not even about building a cool product because it's like they've reached such a thorough product market fit that it's like, where do we go from here? Like
Yeah.
it's boring to just keep doing the same thing, and we're spending this money on all these like highly talented VPs and design teams and product teams. Like they've got to build something. So it's almost like that's why, yeah, I think with the freelance, like with these small teams and startups, it's like you just it doesn't take a lot of screens and flows to really get something out there in front of people for them to start using it and being like, oh, this is awesome. Like, this is a simple tool. It solves my very specific need. Let's go from here. Like, even doing part-time hours with some of the clients I've worked with, I still feel like we're overdoing it. Like, I'm like, we could have done half as much of these features and just shipped it, and then let people use it and see what happens, and then go from there. So it's I feel like that's probably not a popular thing to talk about, that like a full-time designer is not always necessary for a team. But more power to the freelance community, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of bringing this all together, Trevor, thinking of this through the lens of a freelancer, one of the things Claire and I like to ask people is the infamous start, stop, and continue. So as a freelancer, what do you wish, and you can think about this in the purview of clients, companies, or just other designers in the community, what do you wish people would stop doing?
In the freelance community?
What do you think, Claire? Freelance community?
Let's go freelance. Yeah.
Okay. Freelance community.
I think that there's a popular trend of like celebrating revenue metrics, and I mean, it doesn't bother me that bad. And I've talked about, like, I've celebrated that I've recouped my money that I was making at my freelance, but I've never been so bold as to share like the exact numbers I'm making. And like, I just had my 50K month, or now we've had like 3 consecutive 100K months. I get why they do it. Like, I think they're trying to establish some credibility, but like it could totally be made up too. So I don't love those.
I'm with you. I think
posts.
it feels kind of
I don't
like
it is like, and I don't think that designers should be afraid to talk about money, but it's specifically like these design agencies and solo designers. Like, it almost feels a little bit like read the room. Like, people don't have jobs, and here it feels it's hard. I feel torn on this because even just yesterday I posted about, like, I think we should brag a bit more as individuals online. Like, sometimes we're afraid to self-promote because we're just afraid of bragging, And so, on the one hand, I'm like, I feel like you should, but I think for some reason it's about like the specific monetary bragging posts that I'm like, they're not my favorite. So I guess I'm trying to soften the landing and saying maybe those could stop a little bit, just because it just seems like, money's a very sensitive topic, and some people have zero income right now. And then it's like, 50K month, here we go. Like, I don't know. It just feels a little funny sometimes.
I agree. Stop bragging about how much money you're making.
Right.
Stop.
Especially when you're putting like, I had a $700 million month last month. Like, come on now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So conversely, what do you wish people would start doing? I wish, and myself included, I think designers, I'm going to feel like I'm quoting Dan Petty. I don't know if you guys know Dan Petty on Twitter. He says, I even commented on one of his posts one time, and I said, "You are Dan, share your work, Petty." Like, that's his middle name, is share your work. But I do feel like, myself included, especially myself, like, I wish I shared more work, like more actual case study, whether it's UI or success stories. I feel like I've gotten in this habit on LinkedIn of just like talking about almost like design tips. And I think a lot of people fall into this because it's just, sometimes it's scary to share your work because you're afraid of what people are going to say. And I've seen this before. I saw someone shared their work the other day, and in the comments, someone was like, "Oh, this is okay." Like, what? Like, people are so bold. Like, I don't know. It's just so funny. But that's the fear. I think that's what gives people the fear of sharing their work. But I think we need to share our work more often. I agree. And I think the other side of that, though, the one trend that I don't love right now is, and I don't even know if it's their work. That's the problem, is I see so many people right now sharing, would you go with A or B? But there's no context. There's no, I don't know if they designed it. I don't know what it's for. I just see those all over the place now. And with no context, it's really hard to.
I'm sorry for you. I haven't seen those lately. I used to see those a lot a couple of years ago, but I haven't seen it. Maybe I've like,
we have very different algorithms, Trevor.
Yes. I'm so sorry for you. Yes, for sure. I think if somebody's going to share work, even just a sentence of context just of like what you were trying to achieve and why you did this. Like, why was this beneficial to the team? Like that would be
or
way
even
better
like,
than
here's A and B. I chose B and here's why. Right?
Yeah, that's great.
And let's
That's
start
awesome.
a conversation over that, as opposed to just throw me a couple designs and say which one. Well, I don't
Yeah.
know. You know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The zero context design work, I feel like that's not ideal. So share your work with context. There we go.
There you go.
Share your work
Perfect
with some
ones.
context.
Yep.
Yes.
And so finally, what should we all continue doing?
I think the design community is pretty supportive of one another. I think that's something that is unique about our industry. And like there's designers on social media constantly making lists of like, these are designers you should go follow, or this person's looking for work. Like I see a lot of support going on, and I don't see that as much in other industries. Like I don't see accountants like, here's all the accountants, and maybe it's just because I don't see it. Maybe it's
I don't know
there.
that they talk, Trevor. That's the
Yeah.
problem. Just kidding.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're not listening right now.
Sorry, accountants.
So I feel like that's something special about the design community, is being supportive. Not like sometimes there'll be people that I will follow on social, and they only always ever just talk about themselves. And again, I feel like I'm contradicting my post yesterday. Like, yes, we should self-promote, but we should continue supporting others. Like maybe, and I've wanted to do this. I've done this a couple times, but I should do this more to hold myself accountable. But like, if I see a portfolio that I love, don't just always share my work, share somebody else's work and say, hey, Molly did this great thing and I love how she did this in her portfolio, and here's why. And that would be,
I love
like that type of content is so good, because it's good for you, it's good for them, it's a
Makes
win-win.
them feel so good. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Love that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Trevor, we are extremely appreciative of you being on the show. And for anyone out there who's listening today and you don't follow Trevor on LinkedIn, I implore you to go check out his profile and give him a follow. So with that, thank you, Trevor, for being on the show, it's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. You guys are great. This is awesome. This is a really fun conversation to have.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you'd like to connect with us, check out our website at bouncepodcast.com.